On this episode of Keep Them Coming, I am joined by somebody who's emerged as one of my recent favorite content creators, recovering man-child, Zach Watson. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Kristen. Appreciate it.
So I love your branding that you have as the recovering man-child. That's really what struck me because obviously with what I do in coaching couples and even some singles, there's a bit of having to kindly put the mirror in front of some people's faces and help them recover from the man-child syndrome. So I'm glad to have you here today for some interesting conversations about mental load, sex, relationships, communication, all the things.
Awesome. Well, I'm honored to be one of your new favorites. It was funny the other day, I made a video on Instagram, just a story talking about the length of my content creation. And I've had like exponential growth the past year, but most people are like, oh, he's an overnight success. I've been making content consistently since 2016 and haven't seen much result since 2 years ago. So it's cool to hear that.
Something just resonated with a video, right? And then it feels like once something catches on a platform, it just takes off.
Yeah.
So congrats
and then
to
you
you
gotta
on that.
Thank you. Yeah. And then you got to decide, do I want to run with this or do I need to start a new channel? Because now I'm known for one thing and my analytics are going to suck.
I'm curious how I look at your comments sometimes and I do see a good amount of discourse. I mean, there's women on there who are like, yes, thank you. You get it. And then there's definitely the men who are like, this is stupid. But I'm curious, what kind of split do you typically see with your viewership?
I don't see too many of those guys saying those things, mostly because they're drowned out by the woman comments. So like I have to
few
find
and far
them.
Between. Yes.
Yeah, I have a 93% woman audience, and that's pretty close to across all platforms.
I tend to lean female, especially TikTok. Like I kind of just stopped making content for men a while back because they weren't watching when they were watching or commenting. They were saying mean shit. What possesses somebody to say something like that on the internet? Just the safety of the screen, I guess. But
yeah, I mean that must be like what they're, I'm not a therapist or anything, but imagine like their inner child or their inner teenager that wanted to say absurd things that couldn't get away with it in the classroom. Now that they have the safety of the keyboard and the screen and anonymity, they get to say those things. And I guess, what was it? Hurt people.
Mm-hmm. Or I like the hurt people will bleed on people that did not cut them.
Oh, I haven't heard that one. That's new.
Mm-hmm. That's a little bit more violent, I think. But hurt people is very it's short, it's succinct, and it's accurate. So you've been making content since 2016. What sort of started this journey into making content as the recovering man-child?
Sure. I'd say the recovering man-child probably started about a year ago, but things started to gather attention while I was on paternity leave. So the short story of myself is most of the content that I'm making is about mental load, invisible labor. I've been coining the phrase, I'm an invisible labor educator for men. And pretty much since I started giving examples of where I'm putting mental load on my wife, people really started paying attention. But people first started paying attention when I became a father. I shared the 6th S along with the, because there's the 5 S's of soothing a baby. And I was like, I think they missed one. I think there's a 6th S of mom's smell. And that was my first video that cracked 1 million. And then the second one was I shared about how during paternity leave, trying to help mom get sleep, and the pain was not, the pain wasn't hearing our newborn cry in my ear. It was knowing that I had to go wake up Alyssa if I wasn't able to soothe her in about 10 minutes. And like knowing that she was that dedicated to it that I had agreed that I would follow her request and wake her up. So that's I think where this started. But for a long time I've made sort of personal development content for my students when I was a teacher. And I made like cringy rap videos and stuff talking about math.
That explains the recent video where you were singing along and made your own lyrics. Okay, I
Yeah.
get it. I like it. Sometimes you just don't know what's gonna resonate with people. But with what you're talking about, and for the listeners that may not understand what mental load or invisible labor are, let's take a moment and talk about that. The long and short of it is, it takes a lot to run a home or to run your life. And there's oftentimes in heterosexual relationships where once there's the coupleship, that unit is together and cohabitating, the woman often takes on a lot more of the responsibilities. It's not always, but one partner can often take on the excess. How do you describe it to people?
Mental load, I think the simplest way to put it is it's usually the thing that either is keeping you up at night. Sometimes I think it's something we can be excited about, but more oftentimes it's the thing that we're nervous about, anxious about. Oh shoot, I forgot to send the permission slip in. Oh man, I still got to take care of that bill. Oh, I didn't send a thank you note to Joni when she came over. Oh shoot, the water pipe's fixed. I got to call the plumber in the morning, but I know that they're not going to be open till 8:00. But then I got to bring my kid to school to practice at 8:30, so I got to make sure to hit that 8:15 window when they'll actually have their phones turned on, because I know the last time, you get the idea. And I think mental load is best exemplified more so than defined, because I think so many people, I was really honored the other day that Kristen Bell made a comment on one of my videos and said that she had been trying to describe this between her and her like mom friends for about the past 10 years and really struggling. And I think just as I've tried to put out more examples of where I put extra mental load on my wife, or just like generic examples where I've seen it in the comments, being able to point at my video, that is mental, like that's a thing. I can point at that thing. I have vocabulary for it. Is really helpful for people.
Yeah. I think the first time I remember describing mental load and invisible labor in a client setting, I was talking to this couple and she was trying to get him to get it. And I looked at him and was like, what is something that you feel like she doesn't appreciate your efforts on enough? And he's like, well, I have a long day and I come home and I feel like I try to help with the kids and I help with the dishes. And she was just like, I think it was the word help that really got to her. And I stopped and was like, okay, so you want credit for coming home and doing the dishes. He's like, yeah, I want to thank you. And I'm like, okay, so did you thank her for buying, who bought the detergent? And he kind of like looked at her and I was like, who paid the water bill? Who paid the electricity bill? Who made sure there was money in the bank account before paying those bills? Who
rotated out the
dishwasher
bottles
the
when
last
they
time?
started to not fit, or got the new ones when the size ones need to go to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5.
Yep. It's all the things before that task that you did. You want credit for this singular task, but everything that got you to that point, she did. And you didn't thank her a single time for all of those things, but you want to thank you for the dishes. And he was like, shit. Like he did get it at that point. But it's even for people who do this for a living. I'm sure Eve Rodsky, her life, there's still got to be conversations about that. Like, just because you also have conversations about what the mental load is and how you as a couple can work to, I guess even the playing ground, right? Be fair. There's still going to be ongoing conversations about it. So what are some of the things that have come up? Because you've been having this conversation with your wife, obviously, for a while, but since it's an ongoing thing, what came up recently about mental load?
So I'm going to preface this with, we had a friend come over in September, and we knew they were coming over Tuesday night, and I had a handful of meetings Tuesday. I had a wide open schedule in the morning, but not in the afternoon. And typically when guests come over, the general idea is, okay, let's get the house cleaner than it normally is. And so I did a little bit in the morning, but not that much. And then, all my meetings happened throughout the day. And as it was about to be like an hour before they were getting there, I was just getting out of my last meeting, and we started scurrying around cleaning things. And at some point in that time, she was realizing how much hadn't gotten done throughout the day, despite it being a little more of my friend that was coming over. And she ended up, usually when we get into arguments, it's that she's a little bit more vocal, she's more heated, I'm defensive, I withdraw. And so she was getting really upset with, like, this is your friend, like that, like you, like this place is a mess. And I think that really stuck in me. I forget what she had said. Like, she said something like, I know you love having people over, but we're not gonna be having people over if this is how it's gonna go every time. And so having that stuck in my head from September, about 3 weeks prior to Thanksgiving, well, we knew this year we were going to be hosting for the first time. And I said, all right, we need to talk far in advance about what clean looks like for Thanksgiving, because I know you're going to have very high wants for that. And I'm on board with it.
Great way to frame it. Absolutely.
So 3 weeks, it started out with, okay, what does the menu look like? What do we want to have it look like? Who's coming was sort of the first week. And the second week, we realized, okay, my uncle wants to bring something. My aunt wants to help out. How do we communicate? As silly as that might sound. So there's a CNN article written recently that I was lucky to get featured in. And I had referenced in the interview a boring meeting. So we have these meetings that we call boring meetings. People keep hearing them wrong and keep calling them board meetings, which are also boring, but makes sense. But the idea is that you're discussing all those things, like that fine minutia that really change the trajectory for conversations and the tone for things. So one of them was, the question was like, do I just message my aunt directly and then relay that information over to you, or do we have a three-way text? With my uncle, do you want to just delegate that completely, and I'll kind of come up with I'll make an executive decision on that one. So like those small things came up in the second one, and then the week before we did a full walkthrough. I did kind of a vlog style video for this one. We came up with a list. I don't know. Let's see. The list is this long. These are all the things that we came up with to have like our entire house clean. After we had finished the list and physically walking through the house, pointing at things, commenting on things, we then paused and said, okay, what needs to happen that morning? What can we do the day before? What can we do 2 days before? Because like sweeping, you can't do 4 days in advance with a giant fluffy dog. So we then created a timeline around it. So she wanted to do a painting project for our front entryway. And I was like, okay, that's not a great idea for a day before or 2 days before. If you can get that done on the front, like 6 days before, then that's cool. It ended up starting on the Friday, midday Saturday. She finally got together all the painting supplies, realized we were missing one, had to go to Home Depot, got to Home Depot, realized she forgot her wallet at home, turned into a very late Saturday project into a Sunday morning project. And ironically, the stress ended up becoming trying to stick to the initial guidelines we had set for the timeline of things, much more so than like getting the work done necessarily. And so there are a couple of things where we're originally on the early part of the list. We're like, okay, that day's gone by. Is that still important to us? So there are a couple of things we let go of. Like, I think one of them I pushed back on more so because I just said like, I really don't want to. It was polishing all of our wood chairs. I was fine doing the fuzz on the seats from our cats and our dog, but I really didn't want to polish those. So I did all the other things along with it that had similar priority. And as we were getting down to the time where there are other things that were getting higher priority, I was like, listen, I'm asking permission to not do this. I looked them over. I gave them like a quick wipe down, but I didn't do like a full job polishing. Can we decline this from the list? And she was like, okay, that's an appropriate level of prioritization. I think
Yeah.
that was a huge, that was like a good landmine that we kind of saw ahead of time, because we created levels of prioritization. That didn't turn into a, well, look around, like there are plenty of things you can do. No, we created the list. It took us like an hour and a half to create the list and define what clean was for all those things.
Yeah. But the fact that you all, obviously your experiences up to this point in your relationship made you decide that, hey, for this, it's going to be important that we get through this on the same team, that we're working through all these things together. So I love that you all did that, especially after the experience you had with your friend coming in town. And I mean, like, not to say that it wasn't, her words were a little sharp. Sometimes we can be sharp-tongued with our partners when we're feeling that either sense of frustration or disappointment. But, do you think that the list worked? Like, did you come out of the other side of the holiday going like, shit, that was helpful?
Yeah, and I think we're also, so I made a video 2 days ago talking about one thing that that I really dropped the ball on was after dinner. A lot of times, like historically, we go down to my aunt's house about an hour away from here, and the kitchen is like a 15-second walk from the living room versus like being on the other side of the wall. And so after dinner, which is served at like 1:00, we walk all the way down and watch football in a different room. I literally realized that I had never seen the dinner change over into dessert. And so all the things that were probably either in the fridge, they're in a box, they had tinfoil on them, the process of getting them put out was completely invisible to me. It was just magic. Like literally never something I had considered or thought about. And Alyssa ended up calling me out. I was sitting on the couch watching football because I was doing kind of what I've been trained to do for 30-ish years.
Yeah, right.
And she came over to me because I had been kind of entertaining her toddler. We'd grabbed one of my Rubik's Cube puzzles for her, and I was playing with it. And, I get locked into those things sometimes, especially when I haven't solved one in a while. And Alyssa walks over to me. She's like, Zach, we could really use your help around here. And I'm looking around. She's like, you are the only one that still has a dinner plate out. And part of it was that she ate too much. She had put too much on her plate and then said, Zach, I need you to eat this for some of the vacuum cleaner around the house. So there are actually 2 plates out, mine and hers, that I couldn't finish. Also, she had just picked up 3 other people's plates. So I wasn't the last one, because if she hadn't done that, but, and then my uncle turns to me, he's like, weren't you just on CNN talking about how like good you are at this stuff? I was like, shit.
Way to call me out, Uncle. Thank you.
Yeah. So then, I had to swallow my pride, stood up, got in the kitchen, and immediately saw all this bustling around and moving of food into containers and adjusting things. It was really obvious for what I need to do, because we had already talked about how dishes were going to be living all day, meaning it's not the typical way of you just put it in the dishwasher and then run it at the end of the day. It's like if something's in the sink, it needs to be cleaned immediately to keep that area open.
Oh yeah, me and my husband had that convo too. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like it was really easy, I think, in that moment for me knowing what to do. But yeah, one of the things we plan on doing is this next boring meeting, we're going to debrief, because we want to do this long term and say, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what do we need to add, so that, when we're having a conversation 2 weeks ahead next Thanksgiving, what do we need to remind ourselves of, and put in writing now so we don't forget 50 weeks from now.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and you're bringing up that point of, just because this is a process you've been working on and these are things you're aware of, doesn't mean that in the moment you can't still have things where you're like, oh, I should have done that. Like, you're, at least, I'm not saying like, oh, look at you, like you're great, but like, I'm not trying to fluff you up too much here, but also, like,
Sure.
there's a lot of people, not just men, there's a lot of people out there who can't absorb the lesson. And whether that's because they are feeling defensive, their walls are up, there's a lack of communication going up. There's a lot of people who wouldn't have looked at that and really seen the lesson. So I think that simply speaks to part of your mindset, which is, it seems like you are someone who's wanting to be a lifelong learner. You're somebody who recognizes that just because you're over 30 doesn't mean that you've got all the answers, or you haven't read all the books yet, but you've been willing to take in new information, and you've been willing to adjust your behavior and your communication style. And that's really what it takes longevity wise. Like, you're trying to do this as a team, and that makes a big difference for couples. But again, like, you obviously had to learn some lessons along the way. Like, we've brought up Fair Play, and that is a book I highly, highly recommend for my clients. That and Emotional Labor. I also do like This Is How Your Marriage Ends, but I have a really hard time getting people to read that book just because of the title.
Yeah, I imagine that they don't want to manifest it, but I'm assuming it's like showing you the path that you don't want to travel, right?
It is. It really is. Well, the title of that book, it's by Matthew Frey, and he's the one that wrote the New York Times op-ed, She Left Me Because There Was Dishes in the Sink, right? Like, I think Eve Rodsky wrote Fair Play after We're Not Nags, We're Just Fed Up, right?
That might have been Gemma.
That was Gemma Hartley. You're right.
She
You're
wrote
right.
Fed Up. It was the shit I do less was what Eve Rodsky did.
Yes, thank you. But all of them kind of started off with that, those pieces. But like Matthew Frey, the title being This Is How Your Marriage Ends, if I recall correctly, the subtitle is kind of like the opposite. It is saying the things that you need to do to save your marriage. So if it's someone who's wanting catharsis because their marriage is over and they're wanting some validation, which they could very well get from reading that book, they're turned off by the idea of saving the marriage. And then if they want to save the marriage, they're turned off by the title saying This Is How Your Marriage Ends. Mm-hmm. So that's just my feedback for Matthew Frey.
Yeah, noted for future when I want to put the title on my next book, which
that's right,
the current title I'm working on is Confessions of a Recovering Manchild, which I think that'll be pretty palatable title to read.
My book that I'm working on is Lies Our Parents Told Us. Yeah, I think that really speaks to that's
a good TikTok hook right there. I think.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
But like, again, as a coach, I'm out here recommending these books to people, and a lot of times they've never ever heard of them. So somehow this book, got placed in front of you. So how did you start going down this path, and how did you even come across Fair Play? Like, did you just come across the book and go, maybe I would benefit from that? Or was this like a conversation with your wife where she's like, I need you to read this? Like, how did it even come into your sphere?
So I'm going to give you a disappointing answer and a useful answer. So first I'll say we discovered recently in 2020, before we had our child, that Alyssa probably saw one of those 2 or 3 articles. I don't know which one it was, but it came across her. One of her friends shared it with her, and she really wanted to share it with me. She didn't. She totally forgot about this until very recently, but she remembers being scared to share it with me. Probably just generally talking about mental and invisible labor, domestic labor, because I was defensive, because I had my walls up and had a hard time seeing a lot of the things that existed in our home that she was managing. So one, I'd like to say, because I think if any of the listeners here go into any of my comments, you're going to see a bunch of people gas me up that I look really good, probably better than I'm actually performing behind closed doors, but I try to open the doors up so people can see. So I feel like you can kind of come a long way from being defensive, not being able to hear Fair Play, and then making 400 videos about it a couple years later. So it's possible. I'll start with that. And the second one, I'll say, this is the disappointing answer, is that I think it came to me because I watched a lot of Laura Danger's content, and my friend Abby E.
Yeah,
It's Me Abby
I'm
E on
friends with
TikTok.
Abby. She's here in KC with me.
Oh, cool.
I'm trying to get her to go out and have coffee with me sometime, but yeah, I love Abby.
Yeah, she's a good homie now. Both of them recommended Fair Play to me. This was like this was like late spring, summer last year, and they're like, great book, totally recommend it. And then part of the reason I picked up was one, both of them had, I think, given me kudos before, or like had acknowledged me in some way. I think Abby had said something before, saying like Zach does a really good job talking about like healthy masculinity concepts. I don't remember what it was that Laura had done, but I was resonating with what she was saying. I also had, about 80,000 followers on TikTok at the time. 90+% were women, and I was like, okay, this probably be a good book to read. It'll be good content for me to reflect in front of my viewership, and I think it might, continue to move the conversation. I had also just read Ruth Bader Ginsburg because Roe v. Wade had just been overturned, and I was like trying to understand more about that. So the reason I think this is a disappointing answer is I didn't pick up the book because Alyssa told me to. I didn't pick it up because I thought my marriage was.
No, I'm glad that's not the reason. I'm actually really glad that's not the reason.
I picked it up because I thought, one, it would make good content. Two, I trusted two of the people that recommended it to me. And then as I started reading it, I shared like one of the things I wanted to do is have really candid reflections on the book. So I really tried to, okay, if I'm mowing the lawn right now and I'm going to listen, like I'm planning on pausing the mower and doing like a ad hoc video when something hits home and I want to share about it. And that's, I think there's a lot of good feedback. Those toxic time messages are still hard to wrap my head around. And I have a group of, for all the guys that I work with, I have a very specific set of reflection questions that I want them to go through as they read the book. So it's really easy for audiobooks to just kind of wash over you and implement zero of it.
Oh, totally. Or how many times I've had one half of a couple sit in my office and say, we've had these books. We've had this sitting there. They won't open it. I've read it. They won't touch it. So again, my thank you to you is being the kind of human being who is wanting to learn and wanting to grow. Like, to me, that's a fundamental part of the human experience, but not everyone operates that way. Some people really do think, they're an adult, they're good, they don't need to learn anything more.
Yeah,
So,
I think a lot of the guys we think are the hard part was getting the girl. I feel like it's not really clear to us that keeping the girl is arguably harder than the getting the girl. Although getting the girl was really hard.
Yeah, it is hard.
You had to learn how to talk to girls first was the first hard part.
Yeah, right. I tell my couples all the time, and even my singles, especially singles who have, had a long-term relationship or they've got a divorce under their belt. You have to do the things that you did to win them over constantly. Like, keep doing the things that you did to court them throughout your entire relationship. You cannot present that you are this one person or you're going to give this one set of behaviors during dating, courtship, engagement, and then a different set of behaviors during marriage. What you did to win them over is what you got to do to keep them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder if some of those like toxic masculinity sort of things that we learn ahead of time, that I don't think they're explicitly taught to us, that women are objects. Like, my mom was a feminist. I think I grew up in a really healthy environment with my parents, and I think a lot of my friends and colleagues, without saying that women are objects, presented that idea, and I think it really seeped in. And I think it can be really easy for a lot of guys to have that be they're like under almost like their operating system that they don't realize. And then when they get to marriage, because women are objects and they've won them over or something, it's like, okay, the game is over. I've won the game. And then they're not seeing the rest of it.
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it. Absolutely. Absolutely. So what do you feel like you have learned too through this process about like all of this?
I think some things I've learned is that there's always going to be something like a new rock to turn over. There's always going to be something that I'll discover that she's been doing, or that like I just trust that I'll have endless content forever to talk about, even into my 60s.
Yeah.
Like I don't think there's ever going to be a shortage of mental load that I am not seeing her taking on, as life evolves. I think so. There's that, along with the amount of stress of it. For example, recently we have well water, and we have, I guess, radon in sometimes in our water. So we have a bubbler that gets rid of it. And the bubbler was making some odd noises the other day, and I jumped up and told Alyssa, all right, I'm going to take full ownership of this one. I don't want it to be on your mental load. And when I immediately took that off of her plate, rather than saying, oh, the thing's broken, which, historically she might have gone down and checked it out. I feel like a lot of the home maintenance things she is historically jumped at quicker than I have. When I jumped at it quicker and knew that I had no safety net, where she wasn't really aware, because I jumped at it so quickly, she barely had any awareness of even the issue that existed, because I turned it off. We can turn off the pump for a little bit at a time, but it's not good to have it long term. So I turned it off. And so I was completely aware of, like, water was not 100% the way that we want it long term. And the weight that had on me as I was doing it, and then thinking, yeah, there's probably 10 things around this house that are a weight on her. Maybe that aren't affecting the drinking water, but like are a general weight on her. Like the heaviness of the mental load is something I'm consistently evolving my understanding of, that I don't know that I'll ever completely understand, but because I don't have the societal pressures along with that heaviness. I remember there's a video I made last year from, I think it was after reading Fair Play. Our daughter, she was choking on her own spit. She was just like coughing, and Alyssa yells in from the other room and says, "She okay?" And like, I'm like staring, like laser focused at our child, like trying to figure out, did she just swallow something, or is she choking on spit? And I don't want to answer my wife because I'm focused on one thing. And so like, even thinking I don't know if she's okay, or shut up, or like I'm trying to figure that out. Or give me a sec, or I'll tell you in a minute. I made a video almost kind of sharing my annoyance about that, because I was like, I don't want to be distracted by answering her question to deliver care. And it wasn't the video, it was this one comment that really struck me. Was they talked about, I forget if they were the actual parent or if it was a family member or something. They said that there was a kid that drowned. They went to like a pool with their dad. The mom was in like 5 states away, and the mom got blamed for the death of their kid. And what I think after hearing that, or like, I guess after that one, there were a handful of other comments that came in where like women are getting blamed because they're handing something off to what you would think is a high functioning adult, the dad, and they're still getting blamed for like a lack of care, or making sure that he understood what he was doing or something. So I think just the understanding of the societal pressure that's put on women to can keep all these things is increasingly a new part of my awareness.
Yeah, it's I think heavier than even a lot of women recognize, especially in heterosexual relationships. Like I did not understand how much other people were going to have expectations for what I was going to do now as a wife, or what I was going to do now as this person's partner. And I mean, we can certainly have our own boundaries and say your stuff doesn't matter, your thoughts, if you're not in this relationship, your thoughts don't matter. But I mean, that example you give right there is a really interesting way to illustrate how, no matter what, society often has opinions, and we have to work through how much that's going to matter to us on an individual. Obviously, like, that one's a very extreme example, like that's in the public eye now, that's such a big story. But like, yeah, there are times where we have to decide how much does outside feedback really matter or not. And that could be tough too, to just shut it off, especially if it's family. But it's something every couple has to figure out how to work through, for sure. Kind of circling back to my Thanksgiving video. My Thanksgiving video was basically saying, cheers to all the guys who are getting thank you blowies for helping to make the holiday magic happen this year. And it was just a quick little thing, and I didn't put much conversation in the caption. I wasn't trying to capture that much nuance with it. I was just trying to be very direct and start a conversation. And did it start a conversation? Some people viewed it as I was saying that I use sex as a bartering tool, or it's like I'm dangling a carrot in front of my husband to get him to do things. And I was like, no, imagine that it's simply when my husband does more around the holidays, or more, to participate in our lives, I just have more mental space to want to be physically intimate with him. Like, I don't want to bang him after I've had a long day and I've done everything, in my perception at least, everything around the house or everything for this event. If I'm mentally overloaded, the last thing that I want to think about is sex. But yeah, I am curious. Do you feel like there's been a change in your sex life since you have started this journey trying to learn more about how to have more equity in your relationship with regards to invisible labor?
I think it's so first off, I want to respond to the video idea, as I think
Sure.
a lot of people miss. I was a math teacher, so I think I understand this a little bit better, is that it's causation versus correlation. So a lot of people are saying that it's a direct relationship, X equals an amount of Y, but it's just correlation. Like, if there's less on their plate, there's more space for intimacy, and it's likely to happen. That doesn't mean it will happen.
Correct.
But coming back to us, I think it's been less about that correlation and me taking things off her plate, and more about us having hard conversations. So I think we've gotten increasingly better at having hard conversations. I think it was late spring or summer. There's this conversation I had with Alyssa around. Started with, I made 3 comments throughout the day. Her parents were over. I was increasingly annoyed that our toddler was still drinking out of the bottle versus like a sippy cup. It was mostly that when I was at the pediatrician, that was a comment they made, and I just felt really insecure about it. And so whenever she would let that happen, like hand her a bottle instead of a sippy cup, I would get like increasingly annoyed. And so I said something like in front of her parents, kind of like sideways, like a half insult, like, oh, blah, blah, blah. I don't even remember what it was, but something to the tune of that. And then there were like 1 or 2 other comments. I don't remember now what they were, but at some point she'd come to me and said, like, what's your deal today? What's going on? And I was like, there's nothing wrong with me. Like, I'm fine. We got through bath with our toddler. She put her down. She sat on the couch, and typically the TV goes on at that point, and I manage the dishes. She sat back down on the couch, and she said, I've purposefully not turned the TV on to escape this conversation, which I'm dying to do. But I want to talk about like what happened today. And I don't know that a year prior that we were having those conversations. And so one of the things that's opened up, actually, I was talking about this on a podcast in early 2022, which was about 6 months postpartum. We opened up a conversation, which I pretty much only share with my subscribers only on Instagram. Even then, it still gets friggin' taken down because I still don't know how to mask my words correctly to get the algorithm off my ass.
Yeah, I hear you.
But one of the things that we've explored is me self-pleasuring next to her. And it's been a terrifying endeavor. It started out with this really shameful experience of like masturbation. And after some time talking with her about it, we realized how shameful that of an experience that was for me. And what we also realized as we experimented our first 1 or 2 times is that it was a huge turn on for her. And so there are a handful of times now where I've said, hey, Alyssa, like, I would really love to be intimate with you, but I don't want to force your participation. But like, I want to be here with you, and I want to also be stimulated in that way. And so a handful of times now, I've said, can I hold your hands, or can I touch your back, your butt, or sometimes that sort of evolves into a team effort,
right?
More so than an individual experience. But that initial conversation, having it and consistently having, because there's still a lot of shame that I have to let go of to ask that on any given night. Hey, you must be exhausted, and I have a desire that I would really like to explore. I would like to self-pleasure next to you. And every time she's like, but I don't have to participate, right? Like, she just has to always double check, because I think for a long time that was not always the case for 6-7 years of our marriage. And so it's been this really cool thing we've been exploring. And so coming back to your question again, I think it's getting comfortable with hard conversations that start out of shame, and give us space to get vulnerable, have been really game changing for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I can, yes, I hear that. I think that once you rip the first Band-Aid off of having that hard conversation about something that you feel shame over, and that makes you feel really super vulnerable with your partner in a way that maybe you haven't before, it can get easier to have further conversations about other topics that you're experiencing shame around.
Yeah.
Obviously, in our society, we don't get the best sex education. So there can be a lot of shame around sex and intimacy. And so I definitely applaud you, too, for having that conversation. And you're doing one of my favorite things, which is the solo sex practice while you're still laying in bed next to your partner. It doesn't matter your gender.
Why is that one of your favorites?
Because it's such a hard thing to get couples to participate in sometimes. But that is sometimes harder to get people to do the mutual masturbation or mutual solo sex, mutual self-pleasure. Yeah. I think, again, because it feels so vulnerable, and often people haven't done it before. So it feels weird. It feels out of place. Yeah. It's also, pleasuring yourself has become such a contextual thing of, I do this alone. I do this with the door closed, or I do this in the shower or the bathroom. Like, nobody else sees me do this. It's, even if you're not trying to keep it a dirty little secret, it can often just take on that feeling. Having your partner just watch you do that can be really vulnerable for a lot of people, because even when you're having sex with your partner, having especially intercourse with your partner, either our eyes are closed or we're so close to each other we can only see so much of our bodies. So I think there is a bit to do with like our self-image and how much we are wanting our partner to actually see our full body.
We want to look cool doing it, right? But there's no, right? Well, at least for guys, it feels like there's no cool way to look like that unless you have the body of a porn star, which 99% of us don't.
even then, it's not like self-pleasure kind of just looks funny.
Yeah.
I remember the movie posters for the movies Nymphomaniac, and they were of the actors like experiencing orgasm. And there was a lot of conversation online about how weird our orgasm faces are, and some people saying they don't even want their partner to see them come because they know they make weird faces. Like, yeah, sex is kind of weird. We make weird faces. We make weird noises. Like, just roll with it. Just roll with the weirdness. Roll with the awkwardness. We're all looking a little funny when we self-pleasure. We're all looking a little funny when we come. It's okay. Don't worry about it.
That's a really good point. I had not considered that.
Yeah. I also think that solo sex is a great way to get to know your partner and their pleasure cycle and how they like to be touched, how they like to be stroked, how they like to move that toy, whatever it is. But yeah, mutual pleasure or mutual solo pleasure. I don't like using the term masturbation. I try to not use it that much anymore. I try to say solo sex or solo pleasure.
Why?
So, because the Latin root of masturbation is to hurt oneself. We're not hurting ourselves. We're just participating in pleasure.
Is that why it feels like, I know in a lot of ways the root of words can create like a negative flavor in our mouth, but we have no idea why. And maybe that's like a handed down.
Yeah. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation today, Zach. And so the way I always close out my shows is I give you the chance to ask me a question. So ask Coach Kristen anything that's going to be something you would like to know for yourself. You can ask for a friend, or maybe you want to settle a debate that you've seen in the comment section or amongst friends. So have you got a question for me?
I feel like I've asked a couple recently at the end there, like what the value is, or like why self-pleasuring, solo mutual pleasuring is really valuable. What would you say, like, so I'll share something and maybe ask maybe your opinion on it. So one of the things that have been really, so I keep saying so, my wife recently, this past year has gone through, what is it called? The pleasure master class with Desire on Fire. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but Amy is one of my friends that I actually met the same weekend in the same landmark course that I met Alyssa. So she did the course, started last October, a year ago. The first time she spent a couple days away was in March on a retreat, and then she went again on a retreat at the beginning of November. And her sex has been awesome. A huge part of that has been her letting go of like self-hatred towards her own body. One of the things I'm really proud of her for is she stopped being fearful of like taking her shirt off. That was like a terrifying endeavor for her for a long time before she was pregnant. And she let go of that almost immediately after the last weekend that she had.
Yay!
What are some of the things that you typically are seeing women? Actually, you know what? No. What are some of the things that are almost similar to that you would say men go through?
Good question. Well, I mean, I definitely do have men that come to me and say things like they are worried about getting naked in front of a partner.
I'm not afraid of that.
I think that there's still a lot of that fear for some men out there, just like there is for women, no matter their size. And I think that I don't think there's as much pressure about body image on men as there are on women in Western culture. There's definitely more pressure on women for how their body is supposed to look. I think it's there for men. It's a little more subtle. Like, I don't think that you all have diet culture pushed on you as much, but you do have physique culture pushed on you a lot. Like, you know, when you see videos, when you see pictures, when you see commercials, if there's a guy with his shirt off, he usually has a six-pack. And I remember the reaction to Rihanna's Savage X Fenty campaign where she had men with real bodies, like of all body shapes and sizes. And there are men posting things in comment sections of of like her Instagram saying things like, I've never seen a man that looks like me before. Like, I look like this guy. Like, I've got this dad bod.
Huh.
I don't like necessarily using the term dad bod, but it's what's out there in the culture. You know, a little bit of a round belly, a little bit of a booty, no six-pack abs, no triceps showing, no like gigantic, biceps or pecs or traps, things like that. And like seeing men say that it almost brought a tear to their eye in some of the comments. Like I know that it exists for men. I see it in my office and I see it in the comments section. And still, I know that my default as a woman is to feel like I'm the one that's put upon with some of these things. I think that a lot of women do owe it to ourselves to recognize that men have some of these body issues too, body image issues. Some of your husbands, some of your spouses are thinking the exact same things you're thinking of when the lights are on and you're about to get naked. I also do think like penis size, that's the thing, because our culture likes to say lots of things about penis size. We laud the guy with the big dick and then we make fun of the person with the micro penis or small dick. Or
I'm grateful I've gotten past that one. I'm like appropriately, actually, I think I'm a little bit smaller than average. Mm-hmm. Which that definitely in my teenage years was a really hard item, college really hard item, but in the past couple of years I've just like, I've also gotten okay with my curvature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, like, look, vaginas come in different sizes too, just like penises do. Clitorises come in different sizes. Breasts come in different sizes. Like, there's a range of bodies out there, and when we focus on that like teeny tiny little sliver of bodies out there, no matter what we're talking about, we are doing ourselves a disservice by focusing on that little tiny sliver of the population. I think part of it too is we have to be conscientious about what we're taking in. What kind of media are we taking in? Like, are you subscribing to these alpha male podcasts who are talking about the body you need to have and like the women you're fucking and your dick size? And like, if you're surrounding yourself with stuff that's reinforcing that those things are important and they make you feel bad, maybe you need to change the content you're taking in. And then, yeah, I think that those two are a lot of the things that I see in my office from guys. And, penis size, like, you can't really do anything about that. It is what it is. But also, sex is an umbrella term to me. Sex is like this big, broad category, and there's so many things under the umbrella of sex that you can do. You could do oral, you've got fingers, you've got toys, you've got penis and vagina, you've got whatever. There's lots of different things that you can do that are a sex act. Lots of things you can do that bring pleasure to you or your partner or both of you at the same time. And if your dick size is one that you're not able to do certain things, guess what? There are hundreds of other things that you can do. And I have heard personally from women who have a partner who's on the smaller side, we'll say under average, who are like, oh, he still makes me come like 5 times every time we're together. Like, we just find other things to do. So pleasure is not just about penis size. Pleasure is also about like, what other efforts are you going to put in to this intimate time that you have together?
Yeah, I remember my friend in high school, he got like a vibrator that he would bring like on, not necessarily dates, but like when he was like hooking up with a girl, he'd bring it. I was like, why would you bring that along with, like, I was so confused. I was like, that doesn't make any sense. That's what your tool is for. Yeah. But like I think he helped me kind of see that like the value in our presence in a sexual setting, in a naked setting, is like the amount of pleasure and positive experience you're able to bring, not necessarily what we're able to do just with our own bodies.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm sure there were girls out there who were like, what are you doing with a vibrator? Then there were others who were like, you get it, son. Like, you get it. I do remember the times where I'd have, in my dating life in between husbands, men that had a vibrator in their house, I was just like, ooh, you're another level. Okay. We're going to have some fun today. Well, thank you for that question.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, Zach, we're kind of at the end here. So, you've mentioned a little bit about that you work with people. How do people find you? How do they either work with you as a coach? How do they find your socials? All the things.
I'll start with Instagram is real Zach Think Share. It was originally just me sharing what I was thinking about, and then it evolved. TikTok, it's Zach Think Share minus the real. If people are interested in working with me, the link from one of those two bios, and I'm sure I can give you here, is a relationship goals consult call. Mm-hmm. I currently work with guys in group settings, usually pretty intimate, 4 to 10 guys. Mm-hmm. And we are working on really understanding mental load. We're going through the fair play and having that hard look in the mirror, and I'm pressing your nose up against the pages and saying, like, look, this is what you're doing. Now, most guys don't need pressing of their noses in it because they showed up and they paid to work with me. Mm-hmm. But those are the tough conversations that I help them get through and adjust in their marriages.
Very good. Yeah, I'm sure it's, as you say, if they're already coming to you going, I think I could learn a thing or two, they're already fairly open. But putting that mirror in front of people's faces and helping them see, like, hey, here's what you did, and here's how it could be better. I think that as long as people are willing to take that mindset of, like, it can be better, I can do better. You don't need to be perfect. There is no such thing. But if each and every day you can just wake up and go, like, that didn't feel great, I can do better than that. I learned the lesson, and then you start implementing those things over time, you can look back 6 months later, a year later, and see how far you've come. But you got to start somewhere. Yeah. So thank you for helping the fellows out there, because I do tend to appeal to more women. I mean, for whatever reason, whether it's just because I am a woman, it's the way that I talk about things, I don't know. Mm-hmm. I just want all the people out there to get the support that they need and to learn the lessons that they need to learn, no matter who it's coming from. So I appreciate you. I appreciate that there's men out there who are resonating with your message. I know, again, it's mostly women out there who are like, yay, thank you, you get it. But also, cheers to their husbands who go, okay, maybe I need to do better, and are willing to do so. So thank you for your work.
You're welcome. And thank you for the acknowledgement.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again for being on Keep Them Coming, and I wish you the best of luck out there.
Thanks, Kristen.